All right, so Moreland kicks off chapter 2 here on why scientism matters by saying, because scientism is the air we breathe, we consider it to be both normal and essential. Very few people are aware of what it does to a culture and to the church. And so this is almost the idea of that politics is downstream from culture, and sometimes we see culture being affected a little bit more in the universities. Now, you can probably make an argument for and against that as well, but the current political zeitgeist in the world today, we could probably point to the universities and say that has kind of started in academia and entered the church from there, and so and the culture as well. So I think we do see this type of scientism having a great impact on how we think, and then it transfers over into what we believe is a culture and a church. Believe this, the science is
exactly. And the last chapter was entitled, us the scientific air we breathe.
right.
And so this is kind of the background assumption that we have as a culture and society. And so here he is trying to help us to see how it has affected actually the church, mainly is what we're going to get into.
Right. So this scientism puts Christian claims outside of the plausibility structures. You just can't. You can hold it yourself for whatever reasons it might give you, but just don't bring it into kind of the public square. It's antiquated. It's outside the purview of commonality. And so what people generally consider reasonable and rational is what the hard science is going to be talking about. And so this has led to a number of shifts in how our culture processes reality. And so even within the church, it has harmed our efforts to produce mature disciples of Christ, both in children and adults. And so he's going to then take those claims and talk about them kind of one at a time.
Right. So he's going to give us here a list of why he thinks scientism matters, which is what this chapter is all about. So here's number one. Here's the first one. He says scientism puts Christian claims outside of the plausibility structure. So he's kind of already mentioned this, and now he wants to elucidate this a little better. He says the extent that scientism is embracing our culture, to that extent, our moral and spiritual claims will be decognitivized. So there's a mouthful, right? In other words, cognitivism has to do with whether or not a particular claim is true or false. And so he's suggesting that scientism cognitivizes our moral and spiritual claims. In other words, what he's going to say is, which is what I think we saw in the early part of the 20th century with the positivists, that moral claims, they said, were neither true nor false, right? They were kind of meaningless. Remember all the stuff that the positivists were doing. And so he's suggesting that that's what's going on here. He says, in other words, our deepest beliefs about life, which, come from moral and spiritual claims, our deepest beliefs about life and knowledge and history and reality seem to be utterly implausible, right? Not just untrue, but unworthy of rational consideration, right? As a culture, which has a set of background assumptions or a plausibility structure. So notice what he means by plausibility structure is this background assumptions that we have. He says it's a set of framework for what people think, which affects how they're willing to listen, evaluate, feel, and behave. And all this now has affected, moral and spiritual claims. The framework, he says, shapes what people consider plausible or implausible. So, it's kind of like what we would think with, we can think of paradigms in the philosophy of science with Kuhn's paradigm shifts and that sort of thing. And so now we've shifted, he's suggesting, into this kind of paradigm where certain claims now are irrelevant and they don't make any sense and they're, irrational to hold. And so he's suggesting that scientism has done that to moral, notice moral and spiritual claims, which is kind of interesting here. And he's going to play this out.
Yeah, I mean, look at the popular people, maybe on the way out right now, which is interesting to talk about. But the people that have kind of been put front and center in telling us kind of how to live in pop culture has been people like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson or Richard Dawkins, all scientists or close to scientists in their own right, but, kind of well known to the general public. And they moved from, hosting, Bill Nye the Science Guy or their own version of Cosmos, harkening back to Carl Sagan, or dissecting the neck of a giraffe for Dawkins there. But then they go on to say, I know these things through science, but let me then tell you how to live. And we see the backlash that happens, because then you have Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye using their platforms to talk about the whole transgenderism. You have Dawkins kind of being extolled to admit that he likes living in a world of Christianity, and that's because in jolly old England, he's living under almost the totalitarianism of multiculturalism and Islam. And yes, who wouldn't like to see that? And so we see that scientism doesn't give you kind of this grand finale, put a point on it, but we have seen people try to embrace these new thought leaders that have come out and said, I know science and I know things, me smart man, now listen to me about how you shall live. And we can almost kind of, at least in the before times, see why that split would be the case. But we're trying so close to pair what we know about the physical sciences to then how we should live, that we then run into the wall that separates them.